It's been said that parenting is the easiest thing in the world to have an opinion about, but the hardest thing to do. And that goes not just for bringing up your child, but also for the finances involved. Depending on who you speak to, when you're planning to have a child, you'll either be told that you have nothing to worry about and that the kids come with their own luck, or you'll be told that you have no idea what you're signing up for. But chances are that the reality is somewhere in the middle. I'm Alex Matthew and this is MoneyWise. And on today's episode, I'd like to discuss some of the most important financial decisions that you will make as parents. We'll break them down for you so that you have one less thing to worry about. Joining me today are a couple of very special guests, Tripti and Dilip Chaturvedi. They're not personal finance experts, but having been parents for 13 years, they've got a fair idea of what it takes. We learn from their experiences and try to help them manage their finances going forward. And to answer their questions and yours, I've got Mohit Gang, the Chief Executive Officer of Moneyfront. Thank you so much to all three of you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I do want to ask the first question. You have a son, and I was asking you before we started this conversation, his name is Gaurav.
Yeah.
I will ask you first, Tripti. When did you decide that you wanted to have a child? आपने decide कब किया था कि आपको you want to have a child, and did you want to have only one?
No, मुझे तो दो चाहिए.
अभी भी दो चाहिए.
हाँ, मुझे अभी भी दो चाहिए.
And what did you have to say about that, Dilip?
So नहीं, actually मुझे दो ऐसा नहीं, depend on the condition, financials and the background. On that basis, I have decided to only stick to one only.
Okay.
Yeah, it's जब हमारी शादी हुई थी 2007 में, so as a thought process कि मुझे थोड़ा time चाहिए child के लिए, लेकिन since now we have to do because in 1 year already हो गया शादी के लिए. Then it's take 3 years. हम लोगों ने तभी
3 साल लगा आपको convince करने में उनको.
3 साल के मैं पहले साल से convince कर दी.
Dilip और Tripti, when you decided to have a child and when you had a child, right, the only child that you had, उस टाइम पे आपने कुछ prepare किया था financially, आपने कुछ decide किया था कि मुझे save करना है, आपने कुछ conversation उस टाइम पे किया था कि हमें ये करना है, ये plan करना है?
Well, मैंने सोचा था कि एटलीस्ट 2 or 3 years डाउन द लाइन अगर हम शादी के बाद करेंगे तो एटलीस्ट वी कैन सेव सम पार्ट फॉर दैट, बिकॉज चाइल्ड होगा फिर देन अगेन 4-5 years तक हमें एक्सपेंसेस मैनेज करने होंगे. तो ग्रेजुअली वी पुट सम इन्वेस्टमेंट, मतलब जो मेरे से सेविंग हो पाता था तो थोड़ा हमने किया था.
और आपने इस कॉन्वर्जेशन में भाग लिया था मनी के बारे में?
मैंने शुरुआत में तो नहीं पूछा था मैंने.
बट आप अभी सोचते हैं मनी के बारे में?
उसके बाद से जब गौरव हुआ उसके बाद.
Okay, so I think this provides a perfect opportunity for Mohit, for you to come in as well. And ordinarily in the course of your in the business that you do of advising people, a lot of people come to you seeking advice for particular scenarios. So imagine that this is such a scenario. You have come here on this show and Mohit is here as an advisor. If you have questions about what to do from now, because Gaurav is at 13 years old, you're now going to be thinking of further education, what the costs are, how you want to save for his future beyond just his education to set him up for success in life. So if you've got questions, think about them and we'll set that up. But Mohit, when you meet somebody who comes to you for advice saying, what can I do right now? How would you go about that conversation? Let's start that.
All right. Thank you so much, Alex and Tripti and Dilip. Thank you so much. It's been lovely knowing you both. Look, I think when it comes to having a child and taking a call financially, my first thought is you have to start T-1, which is you have to start at least a year before. Let's say when you decide to plan for a child, that's where the first thought or first seed should germinate in terms of how would you plan for the finances. Honestly, Alex, it's not an easy task bringing up child, and the way you started the conversation today was a perfect apt way of starting it. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not too easy, it's not too hard, but somewhere in the middle. And even when it comes to finances, look, it's is easier said than done. That
You
yes,
have a child yourself.
I have a daughter
11-year-old.
who's 11 years old, so
Yeah.
almost identical in terms of the path, right? So we have to start T-1 in terms of provisioning for the child, what her requirements or what his requirements will be, what kind of, let's say, atmosphere or environment would you want to provide. Schooling. Schooling is ultra expensive in a city like Mumbai, honestly, and look, it also depends in which city you are staying, right? So your cost of education, your cost of living, your other expenses, just simple expenses like the birthday parties are so expensive, Alex. Trust you me.
So, okay, so I'm pretty sure that you have to deal with a lot of his demands, right, Tripti? Mummy, mujhe ye kharidna hai, I need to buy this, I need to buy that. How do you manage that? Because he would obviously come to you first, right?
मेरे पास जब छोटी चीज़ों के लिए आता है तो मैं तुरंत खरीद के दे देती हूँ। जब ज़्यादा कुछ बड़ी डिमांड रहती है तो फिर पापा के पास फ़ोन लगाओ।
Phone laga. So okay. So but then is it a controlled manner of dealing with it, Dilip? How do you manage the demands that you
Yeah,
have?
it's control because I have to again think of my pocket only because as an date की जैसी जिसकी grow होगा उसकी requirement और उसकी demand बढ़ते जाएगी. So I'll back of the mind I'll keep my pocket also कि मेरे budget क्या है और what I can afford to him. So based on that, if I feel okay, it's necessary or I can manage, then otherwise I'll postpone or I can ask him to please drop the.
Okay. आप pocket money दे देते हो उनको?
नहीं।
नहीं अभी तक तो.
Okay, so there is a very clear handling of money in a particular manner. Let's start this conversation in a way that you would if you were meeting somebody and trying to find out how to help them with this particular goal. Let's assume that their goal is to educate their child and to set them up for success. What would the first question be?
Okay, so my first question is that let's say now he's 13 years of age. So what all have you provisioned for? What are you planning currently in terms of, let's say after 5 years, let's say at age 18 or at age 20, you would need some kind of amount for his graduation, depending on what college he goes into. And then for post-graduation, let's say if you are planning something, whether he does an MBA, he goes into engineering, he does computer applications or anything, right? You would need certain amount of money, right? So have you thought about that? What is the kind of requirement you will have at his age 18, 20, 24? 3 critical junctions, basically. And then from there on, for his marriage and maybe
Let's
other
take it
things.
one step at a time. No, so do you have an idea at this stage of what he wants to do?
As of now, मतलब उसका he is in looking for the some tech मतलब is in very good in tech point of time. So as per उसका जो requirement जैसा जो interest part है तो मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है कि ये tech में कुछ इसका interest होगा तो I'll help him
तो
to do
engineering
in that.
करना पड़ेगा.
Help him to do that in that. Depend.
Okay, so if you and this is a simple issue that I think a lot of, not simple, it's a complicated issue that a lot of parents deal with. You would know as well. You don't know what your kid is going to do.
Absolutely.
They're 11, 12, 13.
Absolutely.
For all you know, they want to be an artist and you want to support that as far as you possibly can.
Right.
How do you set the money aside?
Look, ideally, you have to take a educated estimate out here, right? So let's say if engineering or technology is his chosen line of interest, right? You might just want to see what the competitive colleges in the country are quoting the current fees at. Let's say for his undergrad, 4 years of undergrad, you might need whatever, around 20 odd lakhs if he decides to stay within the country and study. And if he's any which ways, let's say the ambition is to send abroad, then the equation completely changes. For the graduation or the post-grad, let's say in engineering, a good campus will any which ways cost around 30, 40, 50 lakhs also, depending on the kind of colleges you would want to set, right? So that's the current cost. If you were to then see what is the timeline, which is like 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, then you have to see the inflation aspect of it. The fees today won't be the fees 10 years down the line, right? So if it is 20 lakhs today, my sense is 10% inflation in education is given, Alex. You can't do away without it, right? So which means at 7 years, it doubles. So in 7 years from now, the 20 lakh fee will be 40 lakhs. So that's your basic math. You start with that number saying that, okay, if in today's term it's 20 lakh, I would need 40 lakhs after 7 years, which is age 20 for Gaurav. right? And that's when you back compute and say, okay, I need to provision this much every year so that I easily attain that 40 lakh kind of corpus.
They've saved a certain amount of money, but they've not necessarily saved enough. Am I right in assuming that? So if you are in that situation and your child is 11 to 13 now, and you need the funds 5 to 8 years down the line, how do you manage that situation, Mohit?
Alex, the equation has only few variables. It has either R or T. I can't extend the T out here, which is the time horizon, right? That's pegged. He has to go for education at his age 20, he has to go, right? So that's non-negotiable. R, again, is not in my control, which is the rate of return which you will earn. I can assume 12, I can assume 15, that's the range I can go about. The only thing which then is in my control
Is the
amount, right? Then I'll have to provision accordingly. I'll have to perhaps cut out my own self in a manner that I provision a higher amount, or then I also moderate my expectation, right? So it's not a given that you need to really strive for that kind of a college or a campus. There are many options available which will give you good and great education at different price bands, right? So you plan accordingly, you provision accordingly. But my whole point here is that unless you plan, you won't reach that goal post. अगर आपको 80% भी पहुंचना है या 100% भी पहुंचना है, you will have to know what is your ultimate amount. Knowing is the first step towards achieving.
Okay. So having said that, it's not unachievable. It's something that you can do. Another option that a lot of people don't consider necessarily is to take a loan. And what people tend to do in this situation is to borrow from their retirement corpus, which I'm assuming, Dilip, that you will very seriously consider doing. You've set aside a certain amount of money. I understand that you're doing mutual fund investments right now. You would have to take from that. Is that a good idea though? Because what people think is, and okay, let me find out what you would do. Assuming that your son gets into the top college possible, gets into an IIT, gets into a top tech college, would you say that I will pay the fees right now and I will work for 5 years extra if I have to, or I will save for myself later? Is that your approach?
No, mostly I'll go for in such scenarios, if there is a shortage of the funding, I mostly will go for the loan.
Okay.
So education loan I'll prefer instead of touching my retirement corpus.
Okay. So that is an evolved thought. A lot of people wouldn't think like that. Is that a good idea?
Absolutely. I would assume so. Look, I have myself studied on an education loan when I went for my MBA, right? And I paid for my own this thing. So the interest component was paid by my father for 2 years of my education, but the actual EMI started post me getting a job, and then I actually paid for it. So education loan is a great instrument. It actually puts the onus of repayment from you to the child once he gets a job, number one, which makes him more responsible, and he also understands and appreciates the hard value of money. And B is you get tax benefits, Alex, right? So there are certain amount of tax benefits if you are in the old regime. You still tend to get certain amount of tax benefits.
The entire interest is
absolutely is available for exemption, right? So I think that's a great tool. Touching your own retirement corpus is an absolute no-go. It's an absolute no-go zone, and I understand Indian parents at times can get drawn into emotions and can touch their own retirement corpus. We have seen our own parents cutting themselves out number of occasions and provisioning for children. My sense is I go with the famous Hindi adage at these situations ki poot sapoot to kyon dhan sanche aur poot kapoot to kyon dhan sanche, right? So if your child is good, you don't have to like really save for him. If your child is obviously doesn't turn up as a responsible child, then also you're saving for wrong causes, right? So
I see Tripti grinning away. आप इस बारे में सोच, have you thought about
सर
this?
बार-बार एक ही चीज जो बोलना बहुत वो चीज घूम रहा है सर मेरे माइंड में.
वो क्यों?
वो पता नहीं, वही मैं बोल रही हूँ ना कि आगे मैं अपने बेटे को तो अच्छे से दे रही हूँ संस्कार जो दे रही हूँ, लेकिन आगे क्या होगा उसके बाद मैं नहीं बोल सकती ना.
Okay.
कि उसकी मैं सारी इच्छाएं तो पूरी कर रही हूँ, लेकिन वो मेरे जैसे मैं सोच रही हूँ वो उस पे खरे उतरेगा.
Okay, so that's a fair point. आपके हिसाब से, in your opinion, and I'm going to ask you both this question separately. Apart from education, do you think that you should give your son anything? For example, do you think that you should build a home for him and give him a house, in your opinion?
Actually, I thought that because इसके पीछे लॉजिक है कि because I take at least my half generation to build a house. So back of the mind, I thought that कि at least मेरे son को वो ना करना पड़े. Then he can do whatever is capability.
So you think that you should buy a house?
Yes, sir. I thought that.
I'm sure that you have not had this conversation yet. You've not had this conversation. So Tripti, what is your opinion?
मैं तो बोलूँगी अपने बलबूते पे करे सब.
That he should build. वो क्यों?
क्यों? क्योंकि पढ़ाई से लेके सब चीज़ पाल पोषण हम लोग ने किया है, तो उसके आगे भी तुम्हें, क्योंकि उसको भी एहसास होना चाहिए ना कि हम लोग ने जितना तुम्हारे लिए किया है, अब घर बनाना तुम्हारा काम है. शादी भी करा देंगे लेकिन घर बनाना तुम्हारा.
शादी भी करा देंगे. Okay, so we'll talk about that.
शादी का भी भरोसा नहीं हो सकता. शादी का भी भरोसा नहीं हो सकता उसमें.
क्यों?
क्योंकि बच्चे की अपनी पसंद रहेगी ना. अब हमारे जनरेशन में अलग बात थी.
तो आप बजट सेट करेंगे, इसके ऊपर आप जाएंगे नहीं?
नहीं.
तो आप ऐसे ही करेंगे, और अगर ज्यादा मांगे तो?
ज्यादा कैसे मांगेगा? तो वही मैं बोली ना कि वो अपने बलबूते पे कर. फिर मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकती फिर उसमें, क्योंकि जब तुझे अपने 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 मतलब अपने इच्छे से करना है सब चीज़ें, तो तू फिर अपने बलबूते पे करके दिखा.
Now I know that this is not the core purpose of this conversation, but since you're here and since you have the opportunity to ask Mohit this question, have you thought about how much you will need for your retirement?
लाइक सेड कि वो हमारा ऐसा ना प्लान तो ऐसा नहीं है, मतलब लाइक डे टू डे एक्सपेंसेस जो हमारा होता है, तो बेस्ड ऑन दैट कि हम लोग ये सोचते हैं कि भाई इतना हो जाना चाहिए आगे 15-20 सालों में. तो ऐसा बैक ऑफ द माइंड पूरा ऐसा कॉर्पस नहीं है कि हमें इतना ही चाहिए.
Okay.
तो और जो हम इन्वेस्टमेंट करते, सेविंग करते, लाइक कि सेट की जो थोड़ा सरप्लस बच जाता है आफ्टर कंट्रोलिंग द एक्सपेंसेस, तो वो इन्वेस्टमेंट होता है. फिर जो इन्वेस्टमेंट वो ग्रो हो, फिर जो कॉर्पस बन जाए उसी का कॉर्पस बन जाए.
Okay. आपने कुछ सोचा है कि आपको कितने पैसे चाहिए रिटायरमेंट के लिए?
नहीं, एक्चुअली तो
अंदाज से आप क्या?
नहीं, अंदाज से तो नहीं सोचा है. थोड़ा एक्सपेक्टेशन भी लग जाता है बेटे के साथ कि बुढ़ापे में काम आएगा.
Exactly. सही देखो, ये तो सही बात बोली आपने. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? You're investing ultimately not in an investment product. You're investing in your son. You're investing in your child because you want your child to be your retirement.
I get that.
And so, okay, so since we're here and since you have the opportunity, Mohit, why don't you take them through how they should plan, how much they need for their retirement?
Look, from my perspective, Tripti, I understand, and I would also love to be in a situation that every parent in this country would honestly believe so that his or her children will take care of all the expenses and everything. But उस हिसाब से आप प्लानिंग मत करिए, राइट? माय सेंसेस, आप एक एक्सपेंसेस देखिए अभी कि आपके मंथली एक्सपेंसेस कितने हो रहे हैं. लेट्स से वो मंथली एक्सपेंसेस आपके 50,000 रुपये हैं, मुझे नहीं पता वो जो भी हैं. उस एक्सपेंसेस को आप देखिए कि आज से 20 साल बाद या 15 साल बाद, वेन एवर यू आर अबाउट टू रिटायर, राइट, आपके वो एक्सपेंसेस कितने हो सकते हैं इन्फ्लेशन को ध्यान में रखते हुए. विच मीन्स कि अगर अभी 50,000 रुपये के एक्सपेंसेस हैं, तो आप रफली मानिए अगर मैं 6% का इन्फ्लेशन पकड़ता हूँ, ठीक है, तो 12 साल में वो डबल हो जाएगा. विच मीन्स वो आज से 12 साल बाद और 12 ईयर्स इट विल बी 1 लाख, एंड इन 24 ईयर्स इट विल बी रफली 2 लाख रुपीज़ अ मंथ, जो आज 50,000 रुपये है, राइट? सो उस हिसाब से यू फिगर आउट कि व्हाट इज़ द काइंड ऑफ कॉर्पस यू विल नीड कि आपको आराम से एवरी मंथ यू कीप गेटिंग दैट 1 लाख रुपी. लेट्स से इफ दैट इज़ द अमाउंट विच आपके थोड़े खर्चे कम हो जाएंगे. लेट्स से योर सन ऑल्सो takes good care of everything, then you will need lesser amount of money, but you have to at least plan ki a lakh a month should be something which you can, after age 60 or age 65, till then perhaps maybe the lift will keep working, you will keep having some resources, and after that you have still good 25 years at least, right? So for those 25 years, will you have a corpus which will keep giving you 1 lakh a month?
The investments that you make, a lot of parents, young parents, tend to say as soon as their child is born, they should start an investment. And I'm sure that you start this
Yeah.
as well. Without getting into what they've done, because I think we should cater to everybody listening in as well. What, according to you, should you do and should you not do?
Look, I think the first thing is that you get your child a PAN card or Aadhaar card, utmost critical, and start SIPs. Day zero, I think your SIP or your systematic investment plan, which is provisioning out of your monthly salary, has to go out. If you do it in the name of your children, absolutely great. If you don't, then do it in your own self. Why I would say it is better to do it in a child's name? Because that is one pot of money which you will never touch. Never ever touch. I kind of stopped my SIPs when I was buying my house, right? But I didn't stop it for my daughter. So that continued, right? That is one pot of money which I know for sure I'll never going to touch, right? If you have a daughter, please go for Sukanya Samriddhi. It's a great tool. It's like an alternate planning, a provisioning with safety, with cushion. But I think that's one of the finest schemes Government of India runs. You should also consider opening up a PPF account for your children. It's always a great tool, though obviously it is clubbed with the parents' limit, overall limit. But it's always good to have this kind of planning and provisioning. And things which you should not do, Alex, I think first and foremost, don't get emotional and don't start buying life insurance policies in the name of your children.
The two of you had a conversation about having a second child. And while Tripti wanted a second child, you said no. Why is that?
बेसिकली ठीक जब भी करंटली जो इन्फ्लेशंस और एक्सपेंसेस है अगेन वी हैव टू गो फॉर जैसे एक सन के लिए हमने किया देन अगेन वी हैव टू गो फॉर द सेकंड चाइल्ड आल्सो और एजुकेशंस एंड द लाइफ एक्सपेंसेस जो लाइफस्टाइल एक्सपेंसेस है उसको थोड़ा ऐसा देख के लाया कि नहीं एटलीस्ट एट अ वन चाइल्ड एंड गिव हिम बेटर फैसिलिटीज़.
What do you have to say when you're giving advice about people? Because oftentimes it's not a financial decision, though it's becoming that, Mohit. Let's face it, a lot of people are deciding not to have children because it's a financial choice.
Absolutely.
But it's also an emotional choice. And we're seeing both sides of that in this room right now. What advice would you give from the financial side?
Look, I can't answer for anyone's emotions out here. But from the financial perspective, it's absolutely important that quality matters over anything else. What quality of life are you going to give to your children? What is the kind of education? What is the kind of provisioning you want to make for their education, their upbringing, their coaching classes, their extracurricular classes, right? Even for their outings. Travel has become a big thing with your family. So what is the kind of real life experiences you're going to give? Do you have enough provisions for that? A child is a costly affair. Let's all agree on that, right? And it's not just 1 year. It's an affair for at least 24 years till the children are old enough to fend for themselves. So for 1/4 of a century, you are taking care of an additional life. It's not just emotional, it is everything. It's everything in life. It's financial, emotional, psychological, everything, right? So you have to be completely into it from all sides, not just emotional side, but from the financial perspective also. There's no point getting someone a life and not
Taking care of them, not
taking
letting
care
them
of
live it to the fullest. Okay,
Absolutely.
it's a point well taken. We're reaching the end of this conversation there, but I wanted you to come and join us in studio because I wanted you to be able to ask Mohit questions. Is there something that you are thinking right now that you would want in terms of advice from the financial planning side that you can ask him right now?
या सर मुझे से पूछना था कि क्या बच्चों के लिए जो स्पेसिफिक इन्वेस्टमेंट टूल होते हैं जैसे कि म्यूचुअल फंड्स में भी हुआ तो क्या आपने जैसे लाइकली पहले कहा था कि आप इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हो तो वो एडवाइजेबल है उनसे मतलब स्पेसिफिकली चाइल्ड प्लान टाइप.
Look, so there are these child care plans which comes in a mutual fund format which have a 5-year lock-in minimum, or at the age of 18 for the children, they become open-ended. But they are like any other mutual fund. I would rather say you invest in an open-ended mutual fund scheme, but do it in your children's name. Do it in the name of Gaurav. I think that'll be great because वो पैसे को फिर आप टच नहीं करोगे. जितना हो सकता है आप उसके नाम पे जो प्रोविजन करोगे ना वो आपका फिर एक पीछे चला जाएगा, वो आपको दिखना बंद हो जाएगा, तो आप उसमें से कभी निकालने की कोशिश नहीं करोगे बिकॉज आपको पता है कि उसका अल्टीमेट यूज क्या है.
And if you're not utilizing it, and if Gaurav decides to become a painter, and it can be a very lucrative career option to have, you can always bequeath them, you can always give that money to them at that stage and say you invest and you do what you want with it. But on that note, Dilip as well as Tripti, thank you so much for joining in and for giving us some perspective. I thought the best way to have this conversation is to bring actual parents on board, because I don't have a child. And so thank you so much for the perspective that you got.
Thank you.
Mohit, as always, thank you so much for joining me in studio and for giving the advice that you did.
No, thank you very much. And I think it was a very different format. Honestly, I loved this conversation today because it's so different to hear what goes behind someone's mentality in terms of raising a child. It's not an easy job. All of us know.
And
but
you know it best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mohit, for joining in and for answering all the questions that you did and the perspective that you gave us. And that brings us to the end of this edition of MoneyWise. Thanks so much for joining in. Let us know what you think in the comment section and tune in for a lot more on NDTV Profit.